Hello, I'm Tim Smith with the Adams County Historical Society, and welcome to another Monuments Monday. In this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about Big Round Top odds and ends. Since we just got done our series of 5 videos on Big Round Top, I wanted to do one where I just talked about some of the things that don't fit into any of the other videos that we did. So, you might think that Devil's Den is my favorite place on the battlefield. And I'm sure I've told people that Devil's Den is my favorite place. But when I think about it, Big Round Top is actually my favorite go-to place on the battlefield. And I think it stems from the fact that when I was young, I spent a lot of time there. You go to Big Round Top, you're by yourself, you can commune with nature, and it has everything you want: rocks, snakes, monuments, and virtually no other visitors. So as a youth, especially when I came to Gettysburg and I spent time at other places on the battlefield, I always find myself on Big Round Top. So I have an affinity for it. One of the things that I remember from my youth that people today probably don't know much about is the Big Round Top Loop Trail, or originally the Big Round Top Nature Trail. And this was, we'll show a map of it, a loop around the base of Big Round Top that was organized by the National Park Service, and I think it was formalized in August of 1964. Originally, as advertised, the trail had 58 different stops on it. If you're familiar with it at all, probably you don't know that they changed the number of the stops a few different times throughout the life of the nature trail. And there was a 1970s version of it and a 1987 version of it. And so at the end, I think it ended up with 18 stops. And basically, it was a trail that took you around Big Round Top and discussed the different types of trees that you would see on the path. It discussed some of the wildlife and some of the battle action that occurred there and the scenery. And early on, it was very popular. Maybe not as popular as some of the other areas of the battlefield, but I enjoyed it very much. One of the things on the trail, of course, you saw was a rock formation that was known as the Sphinx. And this rock formation was a popular tourist attraction amongst Gettysburg people even prior to the battle. And we know that because it appears in a series of photographs by Peter Weaver in 1867, and there's an 1875 reference to it in one of Emanuel Bushman's articles about the history of Gettysburg. And for whatever reason, the locals referred to the rock by a racially inappropriate name. In the 1890s, when the Gettysburg National Military Park came into commission, there's an account, and I think it's Emmer B. Cope's journal, where he actually is shown the rock. And in 1896, in the Park Commission reports, the park actually goes out of its way to give the rock a name, the Sphinx. And I find this very fascinating because, of course, people would say, oh, you're being politically correct. Well, they were being politically correct in 1896. And we'll show some pictures of the Sphinx. And of course, this formation is described on the Big Round Top Loop Trail. Let me find it in the trail here. And even have a little picture of the Sphinx. The natural world engages the human mind as well as our physical needs. I have no idea what that means. The pile of boulders has caused many to pause and consider what it resembles. Sculpted by nature using centuries of wind, rain, sun, and ice, the formation seems to some to resemble the ancient Sphinx of Egypt. And I just always loved that part of the Big Round Top Loop Trail. And some of you may know that just a few years ago, a tree fell in a storm, hit the Sphinx, and actually knocked it over. So a formation that had been around for millions and millions of years is no longer there on the Gettysburg battlefield or on the Loop Trail. And actually, that is probably the reason that the Loop Trail or the Nature Trail is not there anymore. I remember going around it in the early 1990s with my buddy Gary Edelman, and by that time, a lot of the signposts were knocked over. They were no longer there. The things that were pointed out in the nature trail, like a particular tree, had been removed or had fallen down. And so eventually the park discontinued the Loop Trail. But you can still see where the Loop Trail was. You can still walk it. And in several locations, you can still find the numbered stops and where they were located. In the original 1960s version of the Loop Trail, at the end, they say, "As you walked along the trail, you have seen how Earth's most important natural resources, soil, water, plants, and animals, are dependent upon each other. None of the four can exist without the other three, and man cannot live without all of them. His enjoyment of life and even his survival depends upon his ability to understand and use these resources wisely. We hope that you'll take the time to think how you can help preserve nature's balance in this setting and in the one in which you live." And I thought that the Big Round Top Loop Trail was just an incredible resource to the battlefield for people who are coming here, because the battlefield is a very beautiful and a scenic place. So I really enjoyed that. Now, another thing I wanted to mention on Big Round Top is that it doesn't look today like it did at the time. And a lot of that has to do with the absence of the chestnut tree, which you probably know in the early 1900s was one of the more predominant trees in our area, and the blight that occurred that destroyed many of the trees. Also, over the years, there have been a lot of trees lost on the battlefield. Some of them due to battle damage during the fighting because the lead poisoning in them, and storms. And there was a violent storm on the battlefield on September 30th, 1896. And it's covered in the Park Commission book. And for instance, the roof was blown off of the tower at the Bryan farm. The observation tower. And two monuments were greatly damaged by trees falling on them. The 66th Ohio Monument on Cobb's Hill was knocked over, and the 78th 102nd, a tree landed on it and broke the musket. And just to give you an idea of the amount of trees that were damaged, on Cobb's Hill, 120 trees were blown over, and 93 were so horribly damaged they had to be cut down. And the southern end of the battlefield was hit very hard. On the backside of Little Round Top, at Round Top Park, 32 trees were blown over, and 40 were eventually removed because of damage. On Little Round Top itself, 41 trees on top of the hill were knocked over, and another 51 had to be removed. At Big Round Top, 135 trees were blown over, and then another 100 trees had to be removed because of damage. And you can see the photographs were shown here that there was serious damage during that storm. So if you enjoy our videos, remember to share this video and hit the like and join our group of enthusiasts.